There we go. So we're November 1st after Halloween, and I'm going to start with a couple of Halloween flies, or at least the colors of Halloween. So the first one is a pumpkin head leech. This is it here. The materials consist of a number 6 Hanak streamer hook, barbless. The bead is a 4mm tungsten bead. This is a slotted type, which makes it easier to get around the bend of the hook. The tail is a olive Marabou plume, and it's nice and soft material, and I want a reasonable amount at the back. The body is a dubbed body, and I'm using a olive UV dub to give it a little bit of splash. And then the hackle is a barred Grizzly hackle dyed orange. And I have them in, I pull them out so that it makes sure that it's reasonable taper, because you want the barbules to taper from the back to the front. And you want the front part of the hackle to be at least gap and a bit long. So you select ones out of here for that purpose. So we'll stick the hook in the vise, and I've already put the bead on the hook to avoid having to watch the painful process of doing that. Put him in the vise. And I have this, this being a slotted bead, I've got the slot facing the front. And I've made sure that the eye of the hook is not completely covered by the slot facing the front. And that just makes it a little easier. I don't have to whip finish in front of the bead. Thread is A-dot olive, and I'm going to attach that right behind the bead to start with, and build a little dam to keep the bead pushed up against the eye. And I'm going to just wrap down the shank of the hook. And the reason for that is to provide a little bit of a rough surface so that when I run the dubbing up the hook shank, it's not going to spin around me in an uncontrolled way. So the Marabou plume, I'm going to take the tip of it and pull all this stuff back to the side and trim that tip off. Now you can just strip the sides off for the next couple. So don't throw that stuff away. And I'm going to measure the tail to be about shank length long, and tie that on right at the bend. Hold on top of the hook, do a little pinch rack so that it stays on top of the hook. And then I lift the tail up, and I do a couple of wraps right behind the tail. And that's to keep the tail from wrapping around the bend of the hook when you're fishing it. Then I just gradually slide my fingers up the shank of the hook and tie down the remaining Marabou onto the hook shank. And that just helps add a little bit of bulk to the body of the fly. And I will right back with my thread just to cinch that material down. And when I get to the back end, I will put in the hackle. So they say I'm going to look at the way the hackle is tapered, try and have it narrow at the back and longer at the front. And I think I've got this one's a little bit better. Well, I'll get this one that's got long enough fibers at the front to give a reasonably good head on this thing. So there's a good one. It's well tapered. I'm going to tie it in by the tip at the back. And with these hackles have a bit of a curvature. So I'm going to tie it on so that the curve is facing me. And I will tie it down with the little bit of tip facing forward. Wrap my thread forward to tie that down so that the hackle is securely anchored on the body, so it doesn't pull out when I try to wrap it. Then I'll bring my thread back over top of that all to the back where I tied everything in. Get my dubbing wax and wax the thread a bit to adhere the dubbing to the thread when I start wrapping. And the dubbing, as I say, is UV ice dub, which is, if you look at it a little closer, you can see it's got a bit of sparkle in it. It's fairly fine. So what I'll do is I take little pinches of that and I spin them onto the thread with my thumb and forefinger and make a little rope of dubbing. I put this on here so that you can kind of see how it looks. I want to make a noodle of dubbing that's about 3 or 4 times the diameter of the thread. So maybe 1/8 of an inch diameter. Now start dubbing the body right back where I've got the tail tied in. And I will wrap up and try and make a reasonably even body and kind of, I'd say, a little bit narrower body than the bead on the hook. You don't want a really skinny body on this guy. You want a bit of heft to it. So you can see it's takes a bit of dubbing to do this. And every once in a while, you got to add some twist some more. And for those of you who don't dub, I just take a pinch between my thumb and my forefinger and twist them on with some pressure in a clockwise motion around the thread. And clockwise because it doesn't unravel when you wrap forward if you're right-handed like me. And when I get to the front, I'll just finish off with my thread right behind the eye of the hook. And at that point, I'm going to tie a quick little half hitch right behind the bead. I'm going to put my bobbin rest on because that makes the next step a little easier. I'll take my hackle pliers and grab the tip of the hackle. And I'll use the rotary feature on my vise and start running the hackle forward. And by using the hackle pliers, I can keep the barbules of the hackle at right angles to the hook shank so that they actually unravel nicely and point out at a right angle to the hook shank all the way up. And an open spiral until you get to just behind the bead. And then I'll do a couple of close wraps right behind the bead that will leave the longer barbules of the hackle sticking out. Just have to strip those back a bit so they stand out. And then I'll wrap over top of that. Wrap in front a couple. Get in here with my scissors and just catch the stem of that hackle. Hold the long barbules back from the bead and wrap right behind the bead. And with my whip finisher, I will tie that right behind the bead. And there you have it. Pumpkinhead Leech. Has a nice soft hackle at the front and a nice sort of taper to it. And you fish this because this is a ring eye style hook. I would fish this using a non-slip loop so that it has a tendency to wobble back and forth because it's a flat ring eye hook and it doesn't, if you tie a regular knot where it's cinched down to that, it won't have the same side to side or up and down motion. So that's the first one. Really quick and easy. Get that up nice and close so you can see them. Okay, so put those material on the side. The next one is a Czech Nymph, and I fortunately have a small inventory, getting smaller every day, of Partridge hooks that I picked up. And this is a size 10 Czech Nymph hook, which not only has, it's barbless, but you'll notice that it, and I turn it this way, you'll see it's got a little, the point's got a little hook to the side. Oh, you can see that. It's not a straight hook. Which makes getting the bead on sometimes a little bit tricky, but it does kind of, it's barbless, but the little bend acts kind of like a barb. And I put this in the vise after the bead is on. And I put this in the vise so that it's pointing down like that. When I start tying, I'm going to do that. But to begin with, I'm going to put it a little bit further up. The bead is on so that the round hole is right up against the eye, because otherwise the slots in the slotted beads will completely cover the eye. I'm going to build a little body, a tapered body. I'm using some stretch floss, some white stretch floss. And I'll start right behind the bead. And I will go down the shank of the hook until probably it's right over top where the point is. Then bring the thread back up to right behind the bead. I'm going to take, I got a little container of lead wire. I'm going to take some O2O lead wire because I want a little extra weight on this particular pattern. So the bead is oriented so the slots are kind of on the side. And I'm going to take the lead wire on the near side and kind of poke it into that little slot and wrap down, I'd say about a third of the shank. So I'll turn this around so you can see where the slot is there. I've stuck the wire in. When I get there, I'll break the wire off. Whoop, I didn't get that off. I didn't, let's try that again. Obviously didn't pull on this stretch floss enough. So let's do that again. There we go. About halfway down the shank. Break it off. I'm going to turn the fly over a bit. I'm going to put the lead wire on the other side of the hook. So one side, put the lead wire on the other side of the hook and tie down the side of the shank. So the reason for doing this is to build a bit of a tapered body. And when I get to the very back, I'm just going to pinch that last piece of wire over onto the top of the hook and make 2 or 3 wraps before I pinch it off. Then I'll take my pliers and I go and flatten that wire horizontally on the hook shank. And you can see it's kind of flat. This shirt is not the best for that with the white background. So I'm going to wrap up here and I'm going to make the body a little tapered with a fair amount of thread on the front. And try to taper the body from the front to the back a little bit. So quite a few wraps of thread here. You can see it's kind of, the body is getting kind of thick at the front and narrowing down at the back. So that gives you a little bit of a taper. Come back up one more time and then all the way back down. Now at this point, I'm going to move the hook so that it's a little more vertical in the vise because I want to get right at the bend of the hook here. Now the next material on the fly is either what they call laser wrap or edge bright. And it's this translucent orange colored plastic stuff that has, it's got this property that the light that goes into it makes the edge kind of glow a little bit. So what I would do with this is I've got about, again, about 1/8 of an inch width. I will trim it so that I've got a one-sided point on the end. You can see there's a little point there. And I'm going to tie this so that the point slopes down, and I will tie the tip right at the back here. Right at the back here with the tip right at the back end of the fly, so that there's a little bit of that taper at the last wrap before we start the first wrap, last wrap of thread before we start the wrap of the material. I'm going to take my thread up to just behind the bead and stick a 1/2 inch in there, right behind the bead. Now take this and wrap it around the hook shank, and I will tug on it, pull on it a little bit as it goes around to try and stretch it. And I will wrap it so that each wrap covers about half of the previous wrap. So what this will do is it'll make an orange body all the way up the fly. And that little edge that sticks out will look like a rib all the way up the shank of the hook. You just overlap it about halfway. And then when I get up just behind the bead, I will pull really good and hard on that wrap towards me, good and snug, and then wrap the thread over the top. Give it a good solid pull on the stretch floss because that actually binds this soft material down pretty well into the hook shank. Give it a couple of wraps over top and a couple of wraps in front. And then pull up on this laser wrap good and then just cut it off. And I'm going to move the hook shank again so that now I've got a little bit of a thorax here. And I'm going to take again some of my ice stub and get a small amount of that and twist it on the thread so that I can just right behind the bead, I can put a little bit of dubbing to give kind of a thorax. And at this point, again, I'm going to pull hard on this stretch wrap right behind the bead and get my whip finisher and get in a couple of good hard whip finishes. Just good and snug. And trim it off. And there you have it. A Czech nymph with a little bit of a dubbed thorax. And that's it for me for today. So we'll just go and take me off speaker view and let Florin take over.
How would you fish that fly?
Okay, so if you're fishing in the lake, you'd probably stick it under a strike indicator and fish it like you would a chironomid. In the streams in Alberta, I'd use it on a 2-fly rig. But if you're in the fly fishing only section on the Cowichan, you would not be able to use a float, a strike indicator float. But in most streams in BC, as long as you are not using a indicator fly, if you just use a small strike indicator, like a little corky thing, I'd fish it on the end of a strike indicator and probably try to keep it bouncing pretty close to the bottom. And the other trick with these indicator type flies, you kind of, I just sort of back cast upstream and then get the line off the water and then kind of pull the indicator down about just a hair faster than the current. And that seems to keep the fly on the bottom and keeps it moving. And mostly it keeps the tension out so that you can feel the take. And Florin can tell you about that too. In Alberta, you can use a second fly. But here in BC, you're hooped, you can only use one fly in a rig. And in the fly fishing section on the Cowichan, I think you're stuck with not being able to use an indicator. Okay. So, Mr. Florin, you're up. Are you muted?
Yeah, I think I was muted.
There we go.
So what I'm going to show is an alternative way of finishing off Dave's fly. So I skipped the bead and that lead and everything. So you can do whatever nymph pattern you want. You can always build abdomens this way, and after a little bit of practice, they'll come out looking pretty nice. Just a few preliminary things. So what I'm showing you here is the actual view of what I'm doing when I'm weaving. So the hook here, for demonstration purposes, I put I think this is a Daiichi ring eye hook, 1260, size 8. And what I did is I tied floss in 2 colors. One is yellow and the other one is brown. And I tie them on the hook such that when I weave, the yellow is going to come out as the belly of the fly, and the brown is going to come out as the back of the fly. In order to get that, so I'm going to turn this again a little bit. So for a right-handed tire, what that boils down to is you're going to tie the yellow on your near side and your brown on the far side of the hook. And you want to end up in the usual place where you may have tied the tail already. The thread you've secured this whole thing with goes to the front and is tied off. So you want to have the hook free of encumbrances at this point. And then after you've done this preparatory work, you either grab the hook and turn your vise around and put everything upside down, or you move to your second vise, which of course you do have, and do the same procedure. Okay, the other thing that's important for preparation is to have your floss on a bobbin, so spooled up. So you buy a little skein of floss from the store. It has usually 4 strands. I like to, for this size of hook, I like to weave with only 2 or 3 strands. In this particular case, I have 3 strands. Here it is spooled on an old thread spool. And then I also have a little elastic here that helps keep the tension better, okay? You can try to adjust the tension just by adjusting the bobbin, but that's not always very easy. So that helps additionally with it, okay? And having this on bobbins and bobbin holders helps you control very well what you're doing when you're weaving. The other thing to pay attention to is this floss. When you buy it, it's fairly flat, right? So if you have parts of the floss that are flat and parts of it that are twisted, you're going to get very uneven, a very uneven weave. So both an even tension and evenly twisted or untwisted floss is important, okay? So that's at least the theory. And the final point before I start showing you what's going on here is you want to practice a little bit and then just go for it. Because when you weave fast and one after the other, you do the knots at an even pace, they come out nice and even. If you stop and think and pause and whatever, you'll always muck up the tension on the floss and it doesn't come out as nice. So this is, you know, just a little word of warning that faster is usually better. Okay, so now I have belly floss in my right hand and back floss in my left hand. I cross over the belly floss to the left. It's a little bit masked here by the point of the hook. So this is what I'm doing. Okay, I'm just pulling it on the other side. Now I want it perfectly symmetric here so that I get as even tension as I can. And once I pull this, I keep tension on it and I grab the brown floss and catch the yellow with it. And at the same time, I swing the brown floss under the hook and to the other side. Okay. Then I take the yellow and move it all to the right side. Keep it under tension, pull a little bit back there so that so this round of floss is going to be tight against the previous strand, and then catch it again with the brown, go under the hook to the other side. Then now my right hand floss is nicely tied down there. So I can now flip it over to the other side. Next turn, catch it with the brown goes under. Whoops. So see here, I have to pay a bit of attention so that I don't get unevenness. Once I catch it, I can, whoops, see. Well, let's see if I can fix this. Enough tension there, enough tension here. And then keep going. If I pause for too long, then something slips. And then keep going, and then keep going. See, here I've got an uneven one I'm not too happy with. So I think I was just not pulling. You always want to pull a little bit towards the back after you've gone over the belly there. You want to pull towards the vise a little bit so that your strands. Okay, I'm trying to talk and do at the same time, and now I tangled my hands. Where was I? Okay, so I got that. Okay, I've tied my hands together, so let's undo one or two. Whoops. Not good. Want to wrap this back. I think I know what happened here. This slipped. Just gonna rewind my floss a little bit here, the yellow guy. Just that's okay. This way you'll get to see it twice. Just as it was starting to go well. All right, so here. And you can see here the tendency is for things to slide to the front. And that's what you're trying to avoid. This is kind of the, and once you get into the motion, just kind of keep it going, because that'll give you nice even tension and nice even knots. You can do this with floss, you can do it with wire, whatever material you want. And when you reach the end, so let's say I've done enough here and I have maybe a bead and whatever at the front, then I'm going to get my thread back onto the hook. And the only thing I need to make sure at this point is that I catch these two strands properly so that my weave does not unravel. I think I did achieve that. There we are. This is a bit odd because I'm doing this not in the normal time position, but with all of this stuff upside down and the wrong way around. But here you can see. You can also test yourself if you can tie in awkward positions. And so if this were to be a real nymph and not just a weave demonstration, here you'd be, let's say, right behind the bead, and you could add a little bit of dubbing to cover the last little bit and give you a tad of a thorax. And then going to whip finish this here so that I can cut the thread off. And you can see the finished product. So here you have alternating knots. On one side, you can see how the yellow and the brown alternate. Here you have the back, which is brown, and you have these little yellow bits showing on the sides. And something similar on the other side. The other thing that you achieve by doing this, and you can see where my tension wasn't quite even because the knots are either a little up or a little down. You ideally want them to be in the same plane on the lateral side of the hook. Okay. And so once you've put your dubbing here, you have a little bit of a tail. This makes a beautiful stonefly nymph that, from personal experience, works quite well. And just a bit of silver dubbing usually does very well because it's very, very buggy. It's long fibered, and you don't have to do any sort of fancy footwork for legs and so on. That's one easy way to learn to weave. And you can tie, there's some caddisflies larvae that you can tie using this technique. I like it to do, like I said, abdomens on golden stones. I remember years ago, I had a little bit of luck with a stonefly on the Cowichan, which was in sort of a yellow and lime green color combination. So I would try something like that over there. But this one is also a good one. And once you find colors you like, just note the little magic number on that skein of floss so that you can get it again. Those are number coded and they're quite reproducible in terms of colors. And that's that.
Okay.
Very, very impressive, Lauren.
Thank you both.
I'll do a stop recording.